Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last session of the day. We're delighted to have you here at this year's Industry Conference presented by Christie Digital at the 50th Toronto International Film Festival presented by Rogers. My name is Ava Young. I'm the manager of conference here at TIFF. It's a pleasure for me to introduce our next session, Perspectives, Producing Elevated Art House Series. Auteur-driven and cinematically ambitious series are redefining episodic storytelling. This conversation brings together producers working at the intersection of art and commerce and highlights how they're creating spaces for bold work to not only exist, but to critically and commercially flourish. Our programming is made possible by the support of all our sponsors and partners. A sincere thank you to our presenting sponsor, Rogers, our major sponsors, RBC and Visa, our major industry supporters, Ontario Creates and Telefilm Canada, and our media partner, Screen International, for supporting the Perspectives program. Joining us for this conversation is Andrew Hevia, producer and head of film and TV for North America at Fabula. We have Sameer Nair, managing director at Applause Entertainment and producer on Primetime Select, Gandhi, and Gwen Gorst, executive producer, Warp Films, also producer on Primetime Select, Reunion. And guiding us through this discussion is Screen Daily's Jeremy Kay, so please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Hello, everybody. Well, nice to see you all. We're going to be chatting for about 45 minutes or so with Gwen, Andrew, and Sameer, and then we'll have time for your questions. So this is about producing Elevated Art House series. We have our guests, and I'll just quickly tell you a little bit about them. Gwen Gorst, to my left. Gwen is executive producer, as we just heard, at Warp Films. Most recently made Reunion, a bilingual spoken English and British sign language drama for BBC One. Gwen started out in film and TV production before moving over to script development, where she worked at a number of production companies, including World Productions, Bad Wolf, and Main Street Pictures. She also commissioned drama at Channel 4. Andrew, in the middle, is based in Los Angeles, head of film and TV in the North American office of Fabula, the Chilean powerhouse production company, founded by Juan de Dios and Pablo Larraín. He was born in Miami, is the son of a Cuban exile, and spent his childhood making home videos in the swamps of Florida. He's a graduate of Florida State University Film School and Fordham University's Gabelli School of Business. He was a Fulbright Fellow in Hong Kong, a Gotham Labs Fellow, and a Producing Fellow at Berlinale Talents. And then at the end of our line, we have Sameer, and Sameer is Applause Entertainment Managing Director. He shaped the Indian entertainment landscape across advertising, TV, cinema, and streaming, and has built a creative-first studio in a diverse slate, spanning the Scam franchise, criminal justice universe, Black Warrant, and The Hunt. And coming up is the epic series Gandhi, the first 2 episodes of which have screened here at TIFF, and a roster of films and documentaries, and an expansion into children's entertainment with animation channel Applatoon. Sameer was CEO at Star India, NDTV Imagine, and Balaji Telefilms, and was instrumental in the creation and success of shows like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Coffee with Karan. Okay, so that's the introductions over with. I'm going to start by asking each of our guests, just tell us a little bit about an upcoming project that you've been involved in, that you're excited in, that maybe we've seen or are seeing at TIFF. Gwen, why don't you start?
Should I talk about Reunion?
Talk about Reunion.
So Reunion is a 4-part drama or 5-part drama in the international version that we've screened at TIFF yesterday. It's going to be in September on CBC and Showtime in the US. It was originally on the BBC in the UK. It's a bilingual and spoken English, or bilingual drama in spoken English and BSL. And it's about a deaf man coming out of prison after 10 years, and it's a sort of revenge journey of sort of redemption for him. And yeah, that's what we were screening yesterday. We had a really lovely response to it, and that's what we're here for. Yeah.
Great stuff. Andrew?
I can speak to 2 films that we actually had here at TIFF last year. The first was called The Mother and the Bear, and the second, The Luckiest Man in America. The Mother and the Bear will be coming out in theaters at the top of next year. And Luckiest Man just completed a theatrical run, and Elevation, it's just completed a theatrical run and is on streaming services now. So that was a wonderful experience bringing them both to TIFF, and yeah.
Great. Sameer?
Hi. We've been working on Gandhi, which we just screened a couple of hours ago. So that's a drama series we've done on the life of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, based on Ramchandra Guha's books, which we acquired a few years back. And I've spent the last, I think, 4 or 5 years doing this. So it's elevated TV. It's very, very elevated. It's taken a long time to make. But it's turned out well. I think we got a good reception at TIFF. This is the first time I've come to TIFF, so I'm really excited. And yeah, I mean, it's based on his early life, parts that you've never seen. And we think it's a young adult drama. We think it's a story for young teens to grow up and become great, maybe, or maybe not. And yeah, it's good. I hope you guys get to see it, and yeah.
I just want to talk a little bit about the green light process, from conception to actually getting the thing made and distributed. I think people here will be interested to hear how that works. Can I just come back to you, Sameer? Could you start and tell us in a bit more detail about Gandhi, how that came together, and how people will be able to see it eventually?
But actually at Applause, the way we've set up the studio and we've been working, and it's been, I think I like to call ourselves the first of our kind, not just the only one of our kind, is that we've been actually greenlighting material on our own and developing it and writing it and then putting it into production. And then we complete the series and then we license it to platforms. So that's a really dangerous way of living, because, you know, you've got to have a screening and then they got to like it or not like it. But we've been sort of lucky so far. But that's what we do. So I think a sense for us for greenlighting is to really find material that we think will resonate with audiences, and try and find those unique stories to tell. We've done a lot of international adaptations into India because I think that's a big thing, to translate stories and tell them again, retelling stories. We've adapted a lot of books. We've done a lot of contemporary history. And of course, we do a whole bunch of original stories that come our way. So it's the same process each time. It's got to get us first. Then if we like it, then we ask these few questions: why this, why now, for whom, at what scale? And are we crazy to do this? And then we sort of commit to it. If we like an idea, we commit to it and then take it the distance. And yeah, we are looking to entertain. I mean, you know, at best, we are intelligent filmmakers, and at worst, then we are very populist. So, I mean, I think those are the broad guidelines for us.
Thank you for that. Gwen, tell us a bit about the origins of Reunion and how you got to know the creators and worked with them.
Yes, so William Marger, the writer of Reunion, lives really close to me, and it was our kids actually went to the same nursery, and it was the first thing that he'd ever written, and I got past his script in that sometimes terrifying way when somebody asks you to read somebody else's script and you think, what if it's not good and I've got to see him all the time? But luckily it was brilliant, and which was really reassuring. And it came at a time, I think, where there was a lot of push in the UK for looking for stories from deaf, disabled, neurodivergent writers. So especially when this script came along, and it was brilliant and exciting, and it was everything that you would look for with any script, and then happened to come from this sort of more unique perspective on the world. So the timing was brilliant for us. And I showed it to my boss at Warp Films and Mark Herbert, and he is brilliantly instinctive with projects, and he just went, yeah, brilliant, we should do it. And I was like, okay, great. And again, I think because of the timing, with the sort of a real push in the UK to hear from more voices like Billy's, we got quite a lot of interest quite early on from a lot of the broadcasters, and we found a home quite early on with the BBC. So it was quite an easy commissioning process. They greenlit it really early on off one script, which has never happened to me before. And so this one was sort of uniquely, which was brilliant, because it was Billy then got to write the rest of the series with the knowledge that somebody wanted to make it, and so which I think for a writer is brilliant, especially for your first thing as well. So
that's highly unusual. That's a luxury.
Yes.
Yeah. Andrew, I want to ask you something about the way you work with Fabula. It's known for deeply idiosyncratic films, festival films, awards films, Fantastic Woman, Spencer, Maria, shows like Midnight Family and Señorita 89. You've got a track record as a producer, of course, but how do you work with the Larraín brothers? Are they heavily involved in everything you do? And how do you bring their sensibility to the work that you do in the States?
I mean, I think it's an interesting question, and it's an evolving sort of answer. The truth is, so everything I do now, I do with Fabula, and the idea is that there are mandates and discussions we have about the kind of films we want to make, the kind of TV shows we want to go after, and then there's certain leeway to try to figure out how to do that. Like, what do those projects look like? Because a lot of times, especially when Pablo's involved, they're very high-level conversations. This is the kind of project we want. Midnight Family is an interesting example, because although that was run through our office in Mexico City, I had actually seen the documentary at Sundance and pursued that documentary, closed the option, and then brought it to our studio partner at Fremantle. We sold it to Apple, and then our office in Mexico took it over because they were on the ground, they were able to localize that. But so where I was able to be involved in that show from the very inception of that show, but at a certain point, we're part of a larger team, so I don't have to be responsible for all of that. We have other shows that, if they're Spanish language, they happen in our offices in Latin America. So we have an office in Chile, we have an office in Mexico, we're opening an office in Spain, and we have teams for all of those areas. My mandate is English language US film and TV. So when Pablo has a film like Spencer or like Maria, that'll go through my office and we'll facilitate and help and do what we need to do to get that movie made. We have TV shows that follow that same process. And usually as a company, there are two different ways it works. If Pablo is directing, there's a very clear sort of process and operation for how it goes. And if Pablo is simply producing, a meaningful job, I don't mean to diminish the role, but if Pablo's producing it and we have another filmmaker, those tend to be entirely my responsibility. So those are the ones that we're cultivating and working with. So Luckiest Man in America was a project that we developed with Sameer for years. The Mother and the Bear, the film with Johnny Ma, was also one that I incubated and worked with. Actually a partner here in Canada, Rhombus, New Fishman, so that we could get that movie made. And then, Pablo's watching cuts, Juan is watching cuts, but we're making the films outside of that.
And you mentioned The Luckiest Man in America. That was here in TIFF last year.
Yeah.
And then Midnight Family, can you just tell us in a line or two what that is about?
So it's based on a documentary of the same title, and honestly, it's an incredible story because at the time in Mexico City, which I think is a city of like 9 million people, there were only 47 public ambulances, and that is clearly like an order of magnitude less than you would need. So private ambulances are filling the gap, but there's a lack of an insurance system that facilitates this. There's no easy way to get paid, and they're not really licensed. So it's a bit of a pirate operation and a pirate industry. So the stakes are high and the ethics are a little gray. You're doing good work, but you still have to keep your lights on. So when you find the patient, you have to negotiate the fare. And sometimes they can't pay you, and you have to debate, like, what do I got to take the guy, but also I need to keep the lights on. This is how I make a living. And the documentarian spent 3 years following a family that ran an ambulance service like this. And that was the inspiration for the TV show, which is a medical drama on wheels. It takes a lot of creative liberties to build out a new family and their own dramas. But it's just a really incredible look at the way a different system is operating.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I have to ask this because of the time we live in. Don't be horrified, but does data analytics come into playing a part in what gets greenlit at any of your companies? Are you working with that kind of information? Data analytics, does that play a part, looking at all the information on what gets the best viewership, what audiences like, very forensically?
Well, we get a lot of data and analytics and insights from the platforms because they are, they can track and trace everything now. So every possible consumer behavior is tracked. And they seem to know a lot, so they know when it drops off and when interest is lost and all of that. But I think at some ways, what we do is that we are really still trying to stick to first principles of storytelling because sometimes data and analytics still don't tell you how to tell a good story. So, but we follow broad guidelines, a lot of social signals. There are some golden rules in any case, like everyone likes crime. So that's been true for 100 years, and I think will remain for some more time. The insight on that is that everyone likes crime because they all want to commit crime but are too scared to do it. So you want to see it. Then when you're watching it, then you get, you say he's getting away with it, so you want the cops to catch him, and then he gets caught, and then you feel happy, and then it's okay. So, and everyone likes that. So in that sense, everyone likes romance, comedy is all of that. But I think what data is telling us is that the one good thing that the streamer has done is created a mass of niches. And that's really this is why it's the golden age of storytelling. So the mass of niches allows us to tell a lot of stories. So the big risk that everyone faces is that we go back to doing the one-size-fits-all, which is that, the same thing for everyone. And I think as creators, what we try to do is to fight that. So we don't want to do the one-size-fits-all. We think that there should be lots of small things and different things for different people. So there's that variety in storytelling. So of course, data and analytics play a role, and you want to follow. Any best practice must be followed. But we must keep the creative core at the soul of things.
Yeah, well said. Andrew, Gwen, do you have anything to say about that in your companies and how you work?
I would say on my side, it's not data analytics, like we're not getting printouts and seeing audience reports, but we are talking to buyers and understanding what they're seeing, where their appetite and where their needs are. But I think Sameer had it right, where it's you try to find the stories that have always worked, that you think are gripping, and use formats. Like one of the reasons Midnight Family is just a good example. It's a medical show. Like those have been popular for a very long time. We try to find a twist on it, try to find a way to make it relevant and politically engaged. But that's a tried and true format. So we try to stick to the things that we think work. I think you mentioned Señorita 89 in your opening, and that's it's a crime show. Set in a beauty pageant, but it's a crime show. So we try to find what does work, and it's always worked, and just find a way to make it feel fresh.
Yeah, I think similar. We definitely don't rely too much on the data so much, but we do get feedback from things on certain shows, and I think with scripts, I think developing scripts, you always develop them in a certain way, knowing how they're going to be broadcast, and you look for those sort of certain beats and stuff, and I feel like that has changed sometimes with stuff being on streamers. With the way you develop a script for a streamer show for us is always slightly different from where it's going out on, when it had gone out on more like linear TV in the past, because you don't have that maybe time to draw in your audience and to have them sitting there. You need to capture them in the first minute or whatever the sort of statistic is for sort of various streamers. And I think every streamer has their kind of like, this is where you need to make sure that your audience aren't turning off. So I think those things are in our minds when we're developing stories, but I think we definitely want to also let the creators have that freedom to sort of to create the story that they were always setting out to create. But ultimately you want to make it a show that people are going to watch as well. So I think it's a balance.
It's a balance. What are those conversations like with the creators if you do have to start adapting a little bit for a different platform?
I think generally you're always sort of working towards the same goal, because people want people to watch their shows, and I think writers, directors, it's always the same thing. I think sometimes there's a bit of sort of push and pull, but I think ultimately, in my experience, you are kind of working towards the same thing. And you can, I think sometimes people can sort of have written a script that's how they see the sort of journey going, but ultimately you need to bring other people on that journey with you as well. So I think there is a sort of bit of push-pull, but you're always working towards the same thing, I think.
Absolutely, thank you. Sameer, I want to ask you, you have said, I'm told, that one needs to create content that earns applause, which makes money. How and at what point in the process can you gauge whether something will earn applause? And can you speak a bit about what do you mean by that?
Well, we named the company Applause. We have a tagline which says it's not entertainment if there's no applause. It's supposed to mean many things. But honestly, applause, like in any kind of content creation, anything that you say or do, we're always looking for the shortest feedback loop. So like applause is, we do somebody does a great performance, you get applause. So that's the first sign. So that's what we think, that whenever we create a piece of content, we have to have people liking it. They must really enjoy it. And then that will lead to other things. So since we spend a lot of time in creating content and showing it to platforms, which they've got to then buy and put onto their platform, that becomes our first screen. It's not the audience for us. It's the platform is the audience. Then they like it, then they put it out, and then the audience likes it, and then they give us a second season, and that's sort of monetary success after that. So I think applause is really important because I think just, like a stand-up comedian, right? You come, you say a joke, people laugh, right? If they laugh, then that's the feedback loop that you're looking for. And usually if you make a lot of people laugh a lot of times, I think you'll make some money. So, I think that's what we mean by, we look for the appreciation and the applause, and then it leads to, financial gain. It usually does.
Thank you for that. Andrew, tell us a bit more about Fabula and how does it leverage its connections, its global connections, to make sure the shows are seen in the most comprehensive way by the most people. Do you find that you're approaching US distributors or platforms first these days, Latin American partners who are your first port of call, depending of course on the language and the project, but how do you think about this? Do you tend to go to American companies first or not always the case?
In my office, because it is the US facing English language side of the office, yeah, we start with the US buyers. And the truth is, I don't see a lot of crossover. If it is designed for the Latin American market and meant for those buyers, the project looks a certain way, has a certain number of, has a certain creative attachment. And in the US, you would have to adjust it for that. We have a couple projects where we've explored in one territory or the other and then evolved it or moved it into a new space, and we have to basically start development over again because we want to be culturally specific to the place that we are airing it. So what I have found is if the phrase is think global, act local, you have to make sure your content is localized and works in your core market first. And if it spills beyond that, great, it succeeds because you found a way to make something specific accessible. But it has to work wherever you're targeting. And that's just been, I think, increasingly true across where we go. What is interesting is in the US, we have done a number of projects that have sort of an acknowledgement of the Latino heritage or Latino point of view of the characters. And that's been interesting because every streaming service has a US Latino, US Hispanic sort of avenue. And then you get a little bit closer because some of those executives work across English, work across Spanish, and there's a certain type of project they want, but that is a very hard target to hit. So increasingly, we find that aim for the US market, we should aim for the US market, not the niche within the niche. But that's really how we've handled it, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, interesting, thank you. I just want to go dive in a little bit more about some of the projects you've worked on. Sameer, with Gandhi, a huge story, one that's known around the world, but very important, of course, to India. A big responsibility, and you're a producer on that as well. What were some of the pitfalls that you wanted to avoid when you were telling that story? What traps did you want to avoid?
Well, Gandhi is global icon, the most famous person of the 20th century. In our country, he goes in equal parts being revered and reviled. So that's a complicated thing. He's also on the currency notes. He's called the father of the nation. So he's really the most important person in India. So when we set out to do this, of course, Attenborough has made the movie, which has been quite the iconic movie. So when we set out to make the series, we got the books, and we went into it looking into find the person as compared to being in awe of the person. So, that was our approach, to avoid any kind of misunderstanding. We didn't go in with any kind of preconceived notion about how great he was or how bad he was, whichever version. So we actually went into the material and trying to find who the person is. And we were really keen on telling this young adult drama, this story about, a young man and how it plays out from there. That's what we were really keen on doing that. And our director, Hansal Mehta, he is this very sort of fly-on-the-wall kind of directorial style. So what he does is that it's almost like, imagine a home in rural Gujarat in 1888. And there's a household and there's activity going on, and then imagine a fly on the wall. And then the activity you see is what you see finally on screen. And it plays out from there. So it's very folksy in that sense, as you said. For being a big global story, it tries to be deeply rooted in its localness, as in, like where it starts from, they speak in Gujarati. When he comes to Bombay, they speak a little bit in English. When he gets to London, he becomes a Brit. So, all of that is happening, and we're trying to stay really close to them. So in as much as we're telling a big epic story, we are not trying to, we're not insisting it's an epic. We're just telling a story, You know, you're supposed to take out from it and figure out as to how this guy became that great. That's for you to do. We are not telling you that. And I think that's been our approach. And we think that will serve us well because it's not taking sides. It's not, I mean, there are no pitfalls. I mean, anytime you do any great political story, there are, you know, the standard concerns. But we are not really interested in that. We are interested in the human beings and all the human beings, you know, who are part of this. So I think that's what we did. And yeah, I think that's been the focus, you know, being really close and personal and telling this very human story.
Has the show been licensed around the world? Is there an outlet here in Canada? Do we know where we can see it in Canada?
Well, actually, we've come to TIFF because we got selected, so we are really excited, and so we've shown it here. The show is still being completed, and then once it's complete, then we'll look to license it. So we're hoping that with the TIFF platform, it gets some sort of, you know, some visibility and some credibility and some, you know, more exposure. And then we hope to find some buyers. You know, as I told you, we live dangerously, so we've already made it now, and no taking that back.
So you've got the applause, now you'll get the buyers. Gwen, I want to talk to you a little bit more about, I'd love us to hear more about Reunion. You work with deaf cast, deaf people in each of the departments to ensure that the production was as bilingual as possible. And you consulted, I hear, with various advocacy organizations and training. Tell us a bit about this, about getting everybody assimilated into that world to make the most authentic production.
Yeah, well, it was a new endeavour for us. We hadn't worked on a bilingual production before, or anything with a number of deaf actors, and we were quite determined from the beginning that Billy, the writer and creator of the show, is deaf, but we didn't want him to be the sole gatekeeper of, you know, what we should be doing in terms of access. We wanted him to be able to just get on and write the show. So we did a lot of research at the beginning. We had a lot of conversations with a lot of deaf creatives in front and behind the camera. We also wanted to make sure that we had enough deaf crew as well, so that it wasn't a sort of deaf people on screen and hearing people behind the camera, so that it was a very integrated bilingual set in front of the camera and behind the camera. So there was a lot of finding out who these people were and what roles people could take on, and we were very determined that we wanted to make sure that we had at least one deaf person in each department as well, so it felt sort of spread across the thing. And yeah, there were some brilliant organisations in the UK. We worked very closely with an organisation called the Deaf Set, who provided deaf awareness training for basically everyone who came near our set, which was invaluable because for a lot of hearing people have never worked with a deaf person before, and there's just understanding that culture is so important, especially when you're working on something which is bilingual. So there was a lot of research, a lot of understanding how interpreters, because interpreters are invaluable for this production as well, and making sure that we had the right number of interpreters when we began. Sometimes we had too many interpreters, you know, there were people stood around. So it was just constantly learning, constantly evolving. And I think film sets as well we can often be quite stuck in our ways, you know, they work in a certain way and we're like, that's how it works. But I think just being open as well to being kind of like, well, we can work differently. So that was a big learning one for us. So it was a lot of learning, a lot of talking to people, and a lot of research, but yeah.
Is the show pioneering in that regard?
I think so. There have been other shows, and there have been a number of shows in the UK in the last year. There's been a couple of others which have had big deaf elements to them. I think might have been the first, I might be wrong now, but to come from a deaf creator and have a deaf lead in it, to be in the BBC. So that was a big thing, I think, and just have the number of, you know, a deaf man is number one on the call sheet, and to have a number of, because we've got some brilliant actors in there, often who haven't had the opportunity to be they haven't had these parts written for them before, and hopefully they'll go on to be able to do loads more. things in the future.
Absolutely, thank you, Gwen. Yeah, I think we're going to come to questions in about 10 minutes, so please get your questions ready. But I just want to talk a little bit about the risk-taking and the limitations of this form. But first, Andrew, where would you say you can take more risks in the form, in film or TV, or is that too simplistic an approach?
I mean, I think in my experience, film has more opportunity to take risks. TV, there are a set number of buyers, and they have their own internal mandates. It has to take on a certain form. There's a certain structure to it. The leeway comes when you have the right creative auspices. So we are doing a series right now that's a Netflix limited series that Pablo's directing based on a book. There are a certain amount of confines based on that. Because the book has the narrative, these things are set. So as long as he's working within the frame of the story he proposed, he has a lot of freedom. But I think in the feature space, depending on how you're financing it, and depending on who you owe at the end of it, if you are able to finance through pre-sales and soft money contributions, a little bit of equity, and take it to market with no other encumbrances, you could make the movie you want to make. You can be a risk taker in that exact way. And if one buyer says no, there are either enough buyers or enough alternative ways to get it out to market that you don't have to wait for permission. You can make the movie you want and find it. But if you have such an incredible budget that you have to have a certain level of movie star, and there's so much money that movie will cost, then you have to play it safer. So I have always found the smaller features allow for the most creative adventure. You can take risks in that space, and I think that's a really wonderful sweet spot.
Yeah, you were nodding there, Gwen. Would you would agree with that?
Yeah, I think we're a lot more focused on TV at the moment. We're making a lot less films, but I think historically for Warp as a company, I think that was definitely, it does feel kind of how it worked. And I think with TV, especially with the way TV gets commissioned in the UK, quite often you've got a lot of voices needing the show to be a certain type of show right from the beginning, which is brilliant because you're going to get to make the show, but there's a lot of kind of, there's other voices sort of helping you shape what that show is going to be. So.
Sameer, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I agree with you. I think, see, linear TV is dying across the world, and the global streamer has replaced it. So in that sense, the number of buyers for TV is actually shrinking. So in India, we are down now to about 5. There was the hope there would be 10, but a lot of the American majors pulled back. So there are 5 big streamers that you can sell to. Linear TV is shrinking, and it's anyway a different kind of content. So in that sense, they also become gatekeepers, as in what can or cannot be sold or licensed or seen. Whereas film, you still have the traditional, you have the theatrical and the streaming rights and other things to be done. You can take more risk on that, and you can try, and of course it's chancy. All of creative is chancy. But at least there is, I think for us, the whole thing about risk-taking is to try and limit the number of cooks in the kitchen. That tries to be the gold standard that we try and approach. So if there are going to be too many cooks in the kitchen, then we're going to have a problem. And and then if it's commissioned by someone, then you have no ownership, because then you don't own the material and it's really work made for hire. So trying to find that balance of having some ownership, having some independence, obviously working within what audiences want, and and trying to have some fun while doing that. So I think films make for more fun, but we do series. We do a lot of series.
This is really for all of you, but I'll start with you, Sameer. Is there a type of show, genre, subject matter that you would never make?
Well, I think the usual ones that none of us would ever make, kind of thing. I think we try and stay away from skin in general, and we try and stay away from too much profanity in anything that we do. But beyond that, no, there's nothing that we would never make. We recently did a show called The Hunt, which is, we made it into a crime procedural on the assassination of our former Prime Minister. So it was the famous thing that happened in 1991, and he was killed by a suicide bomber who blew herself up and him. So what we did is that it's a volatile political subject, so we treated it like a cop crime drama. So it opens with the explosion and then proceeds to chase the killers and find them in 90 days. And we had a great time doing it, multiple languages and really raw, gritty. As I like to say, that we spent a lot of money so that you could see the heat and the sweat and the grime on their faces, so that it came out. So yeah, we like to do different kinds of things, but there's nothing really that we wouldn't do. I think we should, I told you, we should tell a lot of stories.
Absolutely. Gwen, you pretty much game to making anything if it's good?
Yeah, I think the same thing. We always say that we're kind of always looking for that sort of unique POV on the world. So I think whether that is, whatever genre, I think that is, we're, as long as it has that sort of interesting perspective, I think that would be something that we would be up for doing and up for working on, yeah.
Andrew, same with you, I think, yes?
Well, I think for us, the only area where we don't have a tremendous appetite is for sort of broad comedy. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that as a company, we are multicultural, and comedy doesn't always travel internally, and it's too personalized and a difficult thing to pull off. So we do movies with humor or a very dark sense of humor, but a movie that would be branded as a pure comedy, it just feels like not our lane.
And I just want to stay with you and ask you one more thing before we turn it over to the audience. Fabula has a partnership with a company called Runway to use AI in its productions. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So that started as a result of a project where I think one thing I probably should have said about the company and is important is that we tend to be very filmmaker driven. And the idea of that is if there's a filmmaker who is passionate about something and we see a way where we can be additive to that process, we want to be. That's the goal. So there's a super eclectic approach to the projects because it's driven first by the storyteller. And I had this one director who was using Runway as a tool for previs because the film takes place in the Sacred Valley of Peru. It's a difficult location to access. Scouting, he would want to be scouting constantly to find his locations. And instead, he started pre-visualizing these environments and using it to iterate his ideas on what the VFX endings would look like, what these moments would look like, creature design, things that were very focused in the genre of the sci-fi horror that the film is. And he was pulling up such incredible imagery that we reached out to Runway to see if there was maybe a bigger conversation. And what that really partnership has allowed us to do is just get a lot closer to it. Our whole company is figuring out ways to use the tool. But it's an ongoing conversation. Can it do this? Nobody knows. It's never been done before. Can it help facilitate that process? Is there a way to streamline this thing? For me personally, where I think the most value is, or has shown to be so far, is in the previs process, I have a director who is extremely visual. Some directors are great on the page. They're also writers. But this is a visual director in a visual medium, and he wants to communicate his ideas through a visual image. And usually he would have to filter that through a concept artist, through a designer, through other people, and then say, I like this, I don't like that. But the tool has given him the resources to iterate until he gets the image he likes, and he says, this is what I want. And now when he shows department heads, it's very clearly his vision as facilitated by the tech. But I think one thing, it's been really illuminating, because approaching AI, especially AI video generation, it feels like the perception is that it's a push-button get movie, and it is an incredibly arduous process. It is very prompt-intensive. It's very engineer-heavy. You have to be figuring out not only how to use the interfaces, but how to achieve the result you want. So if you approach it with an open mind and are curious, you are wrestling it a little bit like you would, clay. You have to learn how to mold it. It's not as simple as throw clay on wheel, get pot. You have to actually put your hands on it, learn how to do it, be good at it. And it's been really interesting to see, and I'm really excited to see where it goes, because I do feel like we've hit transformational shifts before. The invention of computer-generated graphics has been transformative, and I think in many ways created a whole section of the industry that didn't exist. And I think we're on that kind of precipice. If we can figure out how to use it, I think it will open up opportunities rather than diminish them.
I think we're looking forward to seeing that. Okay, I think it's time to take some questions if anybody has. Yes, here at the front.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations on all that success. I mean, I think the The answer to the question is one thing that I've come to understand. So at Fabula, we did a film called The Fantastic Woman, which won the international Oscar and was actually really meaningful in Chile because it helped foment a conversation about changing the laws around gender identity on passports, and like it was a really meaningful moment, and it hit at a moment where Chile was ready for that conversation, and it helped bring attention to that cause. And Moonlight was, born out of a very specific idea that we've already talked about up here about doing localized stories that could be accessible. And the goal with that movie was to tell a story in Miami and find a really personal way into it. And it resonated on a bigger level, but I'm confident that as much as I love the movie, a good part of its success was the cultural conversation in that moment. And I think what's really challenging when you spend however many years working on these projects, you have to meet the zeitgeist in a way that you can't predict in an influence or influence. You have to just find where the audiences are or where the market is for that kind of story. So as the market evolves, so do your circumstances. Like you can't repeat the process. So to go back to the part of the conversation where we started, where Sameer was saying you find the first principles, you find the foundational part of it that works, believe in the story you're telling, and hope that that's what people are connecting to, and the rest, the best I believe is the rest will take care of itself. You can make the best version of your movie and hope that that's what people see.
Thank you for that. Any more? Yes, towards the back. Yes. So we're talking about how has the production process changed in the age of streaming, yes? And bringing your story to the screen. Gwen, do you want to touch on that? I think we've touched on it a little bit. But
I think for us, in terms of the production of it, it's probably quite similar for us in that sort of stuff that we've done recently. I think the script development side of it is sort of slightly different with what I was saying before. I think you're trying to capture an audience in a completely different way than you were with sort of TV previously. So I think that's where the sort of biggest change has been for me, I think.
okay. Sameer?
Yeah, but there's one interesting thing we've seen, especially in scripted drama, is that as we're doing more dramas, and originally TV was ad supported and had ad breaks. And the ad breaks came at every 8th or 9th minute or something. And we were trained for so many years to write to the break. So you write, it's a start, middle, and end, and get to a high point, and then the break comes, and then you go off onto the ad break, and you come back, and you continue from where you left off. And when streaming came along and there were no ads, people, in a sense, just started writing drama, right? And funnily enough, what we found is that a lot of times when drama is written, there is no rhythm to it now. You're just writing it, and it's a story being told. And you have cold opens, which are 30 seconds. You have cold opens, which are 5 minutes. It's all a bit. So in a funny way, linear TV had rules. And linear TV forced you to write in a particular way, and audiences for over 50, 60 years got used to that storytelling rhythm. Now when we're talking about doing essentially cinematic television and sort of elevated art form, there are some baser, popular rhythms and instincts that we are not catering to. So oftentimes, like when platforms tell you that there's a drop-off happening, this is happening, that's happening, is because it's not being written to a rhythm, and it's just a thing. I mean, we've just noticed it. We are also trying to fix it. We don't have any answer because there's no break. So because there's no break, you got to find the rhythm you're writing to,
A small bit to add, what's interesting and what I've seen is there are now more options when it comes to how you're going to produce it. The questions become, okay, are you shooting with one director across all episodes? Are you shooting in several blocks with different directors for each block? Are you shooting different directors for individual episodes, in which case it looks like more traditional television? But the fundamental difference is the writing tends to happen and then you get greenlit. And in the traditional legacy broadcast model, you were writing episode 22 while you were shooting episode 5. Right. right? So they were constantly running in all cycles, and that affected the way the writers were being able to go on set. When you no longer have that overlap, the writers don't go on set. So those elements are falling away, and I think the interesting part about the old model is it worked in a certain way and gave us a certain cadence to the storytelling, and now we're learning how to take what worked in the old system and put it back in, and now we're reintroducing ads. Like, we're doing what's old is new again, and our transition moment where I think we moved into the auteur space where a single filmmaker could do a long feature is sort of shifting into this newer, older model.
Thanks for your question. Yes, lady at the front.
Question. How do your companies typically source materials for films or series, like aside from the neighbor that gave you the script?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you source material? Yeah. Sameer?
Well, we source material different. I mean, we look at a lot of international shows and look to adapt them into India. So that's one pretty rich source material. We've done a lot. We've done Fauda in India as Tanav. We've done criminal justice, so we've done quite a few of those. We look for books. Books is a really great solid source material, both fiction and factual kind of material. There's a lot of original material gets written, so I think for us it's really that three-pronged thing. One good thing that's happening is that now in this super connected world and with streamers and everyone having offices everywhere, it is possible to get material from anywhere in the world and adapt it to another region. So I mean, we're always interested in that. So like if somebody is, like we've been trying to work with production houses in other parts of the world for material they're developing for their country and say that give us before you make your show, we'll make ours, kind of thing. We don't even need you to make it, and because sometimes stories are good. So I mean, I think there's material everywhere, and we just got to be open to it, open to what you can do with it.
Andrew, Gwen, do you want?
I mean, there's no one way. We tend to focus a lot on true stories. And then whether it's a film like Spencer or even Pablo's series El Conde, which takes world history, completely recontextualizes it and fictionalizes it. But because we're so director-focused, it usually starts with who's the filmmaker, what are they obsessed with? And if they say, I've got this original idea, Luckiest Man in America is a good example. It's a true story. But Sameer was obsessed with that story, and he showed me YouTube footage from the actual game show. The movie briefly is about a man who in 1984 hijacked a game show by learning the algorithm behind the game board. And he did this in an era where he had a VHS system where he'd learned to record the show and figured out what the pattern was, went on that show, and then was able to win because he just paid closer attention than anybody else. He learned what the rhythms were. And Sameer showed me that original footage, said there's a movie about what happened on the day this happened in the studio. And then we spun out from there. We found him resources to help him make that story real. And he was able to do a lot of research, but fictionalize what needed to be fictionalized. Usually, we're not doing a ton of original, someone pitches an original idea, and we say, let's try to make that happen. Adaptations happen. Midnight Family was a documentary first. And documentary, for me personally, is a great source, I think, because it's already given you sort of the arc of the story, and then it's, okay, how do I see the movie in this? Because real life is sprawling and endless, and you have to spend a lot of time structuring it, and the documentaries have already done that for you.
Thank you. Gwen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I think for us as well, it's generally creator-driven. Quite often it will be from an idea that's come from a writer or a director, and they've brought to us. But at the same time, we've made a film from a musical, we've adapted books. It's a wide variety of stuff. A lot of stuff comes from, we've seen this article, we've read the story, conversations in the office about podcasts somebody's listened. So it comes from a huge variety of things. But generally with us, with the stories that we've kind of ended up making or had the most success with, it's been something that has come from a writer-director and from conversations and working with them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Chape. Yep.
Hi, I'm just curious on your guys' thoughts on the growing world of vertical dramas, and if you've done any research on them and want to try to produce things through that way, and if there's a future in them, and if you see a difference in attitude other producers and distributors regarding vertical dramas.
So we're talking about vertical dramas, this newish thing that I think Andrew might want to speak about first.
Well, I'm obsessed. When I think to Sameer's point about the cadence of traditional broadcast television, what's so interesting to me is the way these have developed a new cadence, and the rhythm and storytelling is at such a high pace. You look at the streaming TV series that now have these sort of sprawling, dramatic looseness, and the antidote is the vertical story, which has such incredible, insane discipline. Everything has to happen in 1 minute, 2 minutes, and the plot density of those things, I think, is just tremendously fascinating. But I also think if you talk about verticals, you also have to look at it as both a gaming engine and just an entirely different format. It's not the same objective. The way they monetize is very different, and the platforms they exist on is very different. But I'm paying attention because I personally think it's training an audience and a whole class of filmmakers in a different sort of visual language and a different storytelling language. So it behooves us to be aware of that and figure out how we can do what you're saying, which is find a way to sort of live in both worlds. But the truth is the films that we make and the TV we make could not be further from vertical microdramas. For my money, though, I think China has already proved it's not a fad. It's a hugely successful new sector. And I think it's honestly really exciting to see new things. The last thing I will say, and then I'm done with my minor obsession, is that I do think it's really interesting, if we're talking about what's old is new again, I do think there's this weird corollary that you look at vertical microdramas and think, this is a Nickelodeon of the new era, right? It's this short little bit where something happens and that was exciting at the time, and I think they will expand. So I think the filmmakers growing up in that ecosystem will be the filmmakers of tomorrow, like the way the music video directors were in the 90s. And I think that is something absolutely to pay attention to. It's an incredible farm and a real opportunity for new voices.
Thank you. I think that's all. We can take one more. We take one last question. Let's have a look. Yes, sir, you had your hand up in the jacket. So we're talking about budget and how do you have enough to tell the story well and be able to recoup from selling it to buyers. Is that right?
Oh, sorry.
No, if you'd like to say something there, or somebody else could speak, it's okay.
I don't know if I've got anything to...
You don't have to. Anyway, Sameer?
I mean, I can certainly go, but I did go super long on vertical. Because my feeling is you take the power back when you need less money. And I think you look at, I'm going to use film as an example, but you look at Pablo's film No, which was his big international, it was a big international hit for him and was a meaningful step up in his career. And half that movie is stock footage. And he shot, basically he had access to this incredible library of stock footage of this moment in Chile's history and was able to take the cameras that were the cameras that were used to shoot that footage and shot the new scripted parts of the movie and then just intercut them. So it's Gael Garcia Bernal on a city street. He turns to the right, cut to stock footage of a tank. And you watch the movie and you go, wow, they got a tank? No! It was just a really clever way of executing within those limits, and that allowed him to tell the story he wanted to tell. And I think that's the way you have to think about it. How do you not do the most expensive version of it, and can you find something interesting in that choice? Does the limits and the discipline required to execute give you an even more interesting, more creative solution? I think that's the approach, and I also think that's the opportunity in the specialty art house lane. You're trying to overcome limits and make creative things happen. Money is the exact opposite of that. Money gives you the big, broad, wide shot with the VFX scenario and no one feels any sort of connection. That's the most mass market thing you can do. So the art house approach is always to figure out how do I make more with less and how do I make it interesting.
I think on that note we have to finish. Thank you for your insights, Gwen, Andrew, and Sameer, and thank you for your questions.